The unraveling truth. What was he thinking, showing up at my workplace? Rachel's voice was laced with frustration. He ruined our daytime meeting. I already told Julia to tell that fool I was in a meeting, she snapped. Her lover chuckled dismissively. Your clueless husband will never suspect a thing. So why panic before it's necessary? A surge of fury coursed through me as their words sank in. They thought I was oblivious, blind to their deceit, ignorant of the web of lies they had spun. But what they didn't realize was that I had been watching, observing, waiting. Every step they took had already been anticipated. This wasn't just about revenge. It was a calculated, methodical dismantling of everything they held dear. And by the time they realized it, it would be far too late. For years, I had convinced myself that my life was stable, secure. My career was thriving. My marriage to Rachel was everything I had envisioned. She was brilliant, accomplished, and confident. The one person I believed I could always rely on. Together, we had built a life, a home, a future, or so I had thought. But in recent months, something had shifted. The changes were small at first, subtle enough to dismiss as a byproduct of work stress. Rachel had been promoted to a senior role, and I reasoned that her increasing distance was simply due to the pressures of the job. Yet, those minor cracks in our relationship continued to widen. Late nights at the office, sudden, unexplained business trips, moments where she withdrew, both physically and emotionally, just when I tried to draw closer. It started as an uneasy feeling, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind telling me something was off, but I refused to acknowledge it. I prided myself on trusting the people I loved, and Rachel had always been so present, so open. I never thought I had any reason to doubt her. I was wrong. The breaking point came on an otherwise ordinary afternoon. I had finished a meeting earlier than expected and decided to come home unannounced. There was no reason to believe anything was amiss. It was just another day. But as I stepped inside, something made me pause. Rachel's voice drifted from the living room, but it wasn't the warm, routine chatter I was used to hearing. There was an edge to it, sharp, impatient, curious, and suddenly uneasy. I remained still in the hallway, just out of sight, listening. What the hell was he thinking? Coming to my job, she hissed. I felt my stomach tighten. He ruined our daytime meeting. I already told Julia to tell that idiot I was in a meeting. The words hit me with the force of a freight train. My thoughts scrambled to make sense of what I was hearing. She was having an affair. The realization was swift and suffocating. Anger, confusion, betrayal. A storm of emotions crashed over me all at once. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I remained motionless, straining to hear more. Then a man's voice followed, arrogant, dripping with contempt. Your husband is too clueless to suspect anything. So why panic before it's necessary, he sneered. That word, clueless, echoed in my mind, sharper than any blade. They were laughing at me, mocking me, assuming I was too blind, too naive to see through their lies. I stood hidden, my heart a relentless drumbeat in my chest. They had no idea that I had been watching them for months, piecing together their deception, unraveling the depth of their betrayal. But rage alone wasn't enough. I wouldn't allow my fury to dictate my actions. No, revenge, true revenge, was never about reckless outbursts. It was about precision, control, and I had been preparing for this moment all along. I had gathered evidence, traced their every step, and mapped out exactly how this would end. I wouldn't confront Rachel immediately. That would be too easy. No, I wanted to watch as the world she had so carefully built came crumbling down, one deliberate move at a time. And by the time she realized the trap had been set, there would be no escape, the silent architect of ruin. I moved carefully, working from the shadows. My first target was Todd, Rachel's lover. I began discreetly digging into his past, gathering intel on his lifestyle, social circles, and vulnerabilities. It didn't take long to find cracks in his professional facade, flaws I could exploit to my advantage, and I intended to use every single one of them. For weeks, I silently amassed evidence, piecing together their betrayal with meticulous precision. The more I observed, the clearer the signs became. Text messages she thought went unnoticed, hushed phone calls, fleeting moment of tension when she assumed I wasn't paying attention. Each new discovery only fueled a fire within me, but I remained composed, biding my time. As the days passed, Rachel's behavior grew more erratic. She was restless, on edge, as if sensing an unseen threat, but unable to pinpoint its source. She still clung to the illusion of a happy marriage, but I could see through the facade. The cracks in her lies were spreading, and with every excuse she muttered about late nights and sudden trips, the guilt in her voice became unmistakable. She was afraid, terrified of being caught, and she had every reason to be. What she didn't know was that I had been watching, listening, collecting every piece of the puzzle. I had played my part well, the oblivious, trusting husband, while secretly orchestrating a masterpiece of revenge. The final move was approaching, and soon her carefully constructed world would collapse. I thought back to the years we had spent together, the love I had once felt for her, the life we had built. It had all been a carefully woven deception. But the real satisfaction didn't come from knowing the truth. It came from knowing that, this time, I was the one in control. Rachel had assumed she could deceive me indefinitely, that I would remain her unwitting pawn. But the rules had changed. She had no idea what was coming. The following weeks felt like a calculated game of chess. I was a silent observer, strategically moving my pieces while she remained oblivious to the trap I had set. She still played the role of a devoted wife, still smiled as if nothing had changed. But I saw through her mask, the way her eyes darted when she thought I wasn't looking, the growing paranoia in her every action. It was all there. She started to tread more carefully, coming home at odd hours, watching me more closely, as if fearing I might suddenly confront her. But she had no idea that I had already set everything in motion. Her downfall was inevitable. Rachel's career was a crucial part of my plan. She had spent years clawing her way to the top, cultivating an image of success and control. But I knew her weaknesses, the overlooked mistakes, the ethical missteps she had hidden. And I had connections, people within her industry who would spread whispers in the right circles. A few well-placed rumors would be enough to shake the foundation of her professional standing. But the real game revolved around Todd. He had been a tool in her betrayal, one I could easily manipulate. Todd was arrogant, confident in his charm and ability to get what he wanted, but he had weaknesses. I had studied him long enough to know exactly where to strike. So I made my first move. Subtly, but deliberately, I began feeding information to his employers. There had been speculation about his involvement in questionable financial dealings, and I ensured that the right people heard those whispers. I nudged key investors in his company toward suspicions they had likely ignored before, planting seeds of doubt that would soon take root. And while Todd's career began to tremble under the weight of scrutiny, I turned my attention to Rachel. Her pristine reputation was next. One by one, I dismantled the life they had so carelessly built on lies, ensuring that when the final blow landed, neither of them would see it coming. The fall of betrayal. I reached out to a few of Rachel's colleagues, people who once admired her, respected her work, and saw her as an untouchable professional. Carefully, I ensured they learned the truth. A series of well-timed messages, each laced with incriminating details, planted the seeds of doubt. The whispers began. Rumors spread. One by one, people started distancing themselves from her. This wasn't just about revenge. It was a calculated dismantling of everything she had built. Her career, her reputation, her relationship with Todd. I was pulling the strings, ensuring that by the time she realized what was happening, there would be no stopping the inevitable collapse. The final act was approaching. Every piece was in position. All that remained was the moment she would finally see her world crumble around her. That evening, when Rachel walked through the door, she sensed something was off. Her movements were tense, her gaze flickering around the room as if bracing for an unseen blow. What she didn't know was that I had already leaked the most damning details to press. Her affair, her misuse of company funds, and the shady dealings she had been involved in with Todd. The media was waiting, ready to pounce. And when the story broke, the fallout would be nothing short of catastrophic. I watched her closely as she stepped inside, her face pale, shadows of worry etched into her features. There was guilt in her eyes, a silent confirmation of everything I already knew. Still, she tried to act normal, clinging to the pretense that everything was fine. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with forced casualness, her smile stiff. "Everything is perfect," I replied, my tone unnervingly calm. "In fact, I think it's time we had a talk." She stiffened, her body tensing as suspicion flickered in her eyes. But before she could speak, I cut her off. "I know everything, Rachel," I said, my voice unwavering. "You and Todd, the affair, the deception, the manipulation." Her breath hitched. Color drained from her face as reality set in. "I've been watching you," I continued. "Every step, every lie." She opened her mouth, but no words came. I could see the panic in her eyes, the frantic attempt to piece together a way out. But there was none. "You don't have to pretend anymore," I told her. "It's over. Everything you've done is out in the open now." She looked at me, her expression crumbling, for the first time in weeks. She was speechless. There was no clever excuse, no well-rehearsed lie. She was trapped. I didn't think you'd ever find out," she finally whispered, her voice shaking. "I thought I could handle it." "Handle it?" I echoed, stepping closer. "You thought you could control this? That you could destroy everything and walk away without consequences?" Tears welled in her eyes, not out of regret, but out of fear. "You don't have control anymore," I said coldly. "I do." And then the storm hit. The scandal broke within hours. Headlines plastered Rachel's name across the news, exposing her infidelity and financial misconduct. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Colleagues texting, superiors demanding explanations, whispers turning into outright condemnation. Meetings were scheduled, investigations launched. The career she had spent years building was now unraveling in real time. Meanwhile, Todd faced his own reckoning. The evidence of his corrupt business dealings had been leaked just as methodically. Investors pulled out. His employers distanced themselves. Friends turned cold. The very world he thrived in no longer had a place for him. It wasn't enough to expose their affair. I wanted them to experience the weight of their own choices, to understand that betrayal comes with a cost. The next few weeks became a blur of public disgrace and personal ruin. Rachel was fired. Her once loyal colleagues refused to even meet her gaze. Todd's career collapsed just as swiftly, leaving him isolated in the wreckage of his own arrogance. But the most satisfying moment? When Rachel tried to reach out to me. Call after call, message after message, desperate apologies, empty pleas for forgiveness. But I was done. This was never about redemption. It was about justice. A justice delivered not through anger, but through cold, methodical destruction. One they would never forget. I walked away from the wreckage, not with a sense of victory, but with a quiet, undeniable satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge. This was about taking back control.